resistance exercise is very important during any weight loss process because it turns on certain signaling, it turns off myostatin, it turns off certain signaling agents that cause muscle loss.
When it comes to losing weight and burning body fat, which peptide or perhaps a combination of peptide therapies is most effective?
So that's a loaded question. It's a great question because there's so many approaches to how I look at a particular person and what I'm trying to achieve for them as far as, am I going more for, when we're talking about fat, am I going more for visceral fat loss? Am I going more for subcutaneous fat loss? And how does that work into what their overall goal is? Is it more of a training goal? Is it more of just real fat loss? Because in my world, you find out that, so number one, let me just back off and say, there's nothing better than exercise. There's nothing better than diet, right? Those are the staples of really long-term focus of maintaining metabolism where you need it to be effective long-term with control of your weight.
Yeah.
That being said, the approach is really focused again on the type of patient or the people I'm working with and where their goals are. Is it 5 pounds, 10 pounds? Is it 20? Is it 60? Is it 80? So it really can vary as to how you go about not manipulating, but signaling the cell to be more effective in changing its flexibility. So this is where it gets to be fun because you're really using science to work with this cell that's been around for millions of years that knows exactly what to do. You just have to give it the right signaling to adapt to the environment that patient is in or to help that patient adapt better to their environment. So that all comes down to, you got to put all these things together. It's really hard, as you probably know, it's hard to do everything you want to do with a patient right off the bat and say, hey, I got this great plan. Because if you slam them with everything, they're going to just look at you and go, really? You think I'm going to do all of this?
Yeah.
So you got to pick your battles in where are you going to achieve the most right off the bat and get them to believe in what they're doing and then want to come back to me and seek more information like, hey, I like where we're going with this. Is there something more I can do? And when you hear that, everything changes.
I love that. Well, talk about because I know that there are many different types of peptides, and this is fairly uncharted territory for me, but what is so how do they help to encourage weight loss? Is it through a hormonal axis? They help to boost, I don't know, testosterone, growth hormone? Is it through a metabolic axis? They boost, I have no concept of even how they might begin to work.
Which is a great question, right? It's so this is where it gets to be fun because it's all about deciding how you're going to go about helping a cell manipulate its fatty acids, proteins, or carbohydrates it's going to utilize to make energy, to make ATP, to make NAD. And those are kind of the keys to the beginning of how the cell is going to signal what it's going to do in the future with the substrates you eat. And either it's going to be focused more on protein synthesis, it's going to be focused more on beta oxidation of fat, or it's going to be focused more on glycolysis of just using carbohydrates. And so peptides, for instance, let's say I want to talk about the current craze of GLP-1 receptor agonists, which are the Ozempics, the Wegovy's, all these things that are out there that, by the way, have been around for over 10, 15 years, and we've been in this space for a long time, and all of a sudden now it's a big deal, which is kind of interesting to see how it's taken this long to get to this state where people realize that there are incredible tools out there to assist in yeah, I get it, weight loss, but it's really what it's done for cell efficiency. It's what it's done to improve the health of people. And so let me go back and say, so these GLP-1s, for instance, they're an excellent way to help the cell kind of reestablish its role in something called autophagy, in focusing on how a cell has to clean up its debris during the day and take that debris, clean it up, and then reutilize it. And if a cell can't do that well in cleaning itself up, it's like the housekeeper. If it can't do that well, it's having problems with the signaling and things it's supposed to do to maintain its ability to manipulate proteins and fatty acids and carbohydrates. So there's a role there of where autophagy is something that basically, I don't want to get too out of control here, and you got to stop me when I do.
I'll rein you in.
Yeah,
please.
please.
Well, at least I'll do my best.
I can go down these rabbit holes really fast, but
we like it here in the Genius Life, but I get it.
It's all about improving this aspect of AMPK. AMPK is this activator that starts this process of autophagy and other things that are very important in cell efficiency. There's AMPK and there's mTOR. AMPK is all about, it's a catabolic state. It's a lot of activity of the cell activating, using resources to clean. And then there's mTOR, which is anabolic, and it's all about building. So you've got to know how to, you're manipulating signaling to make the cell become optimized for that patient. If it's at the beginning weight loss, it may be they're focused on the weight loss, but we're focused on the efficiencies of what AMPK can do in utilizing energy and making energy more efficient. So the oxygen you breathe is going to be utilized better in making ATP and NAD. The ability for the signaling of the cell to include the immune system into how its function is relevant to cleaning things up is going to be at a higher level. So you're doing things to make efficiency work better in signaling and energy. And then if that part of weight loss has any component of training or wanting to build muscle, or which you want that to be part of it, there's the back end of the mTOR aspect of muscle building, protein muscle synthesis. And so it's putting all those things together. And so the GLP-1 is a great way to get some things started to basically where the patient notices, hey, I haven't been able to lose this weight ever doing anything, and something's happening. And the beauty there is then you get that patient into the process of thinking more about what they can do to be better at what they're doing. It's not just taking that GLP-1. It's like it's realizing there's so much more to it, right? It's so you can start then talking about introducing diet. You can say, hey, what you think about exercise? Let me talk to you about this. And it's just I'm just so privileged to be included in this, I think, incredible process of how people can recognize their own strengths, and then they end up becoming these zealots in health because you've opened the door just with giving them an opportunity, because sometimes it's harder as you get older, as you get to, in certain states of your life. There's hormones that are working against you sometimes. There's enzymes. There's processes that you just aren't aware of that are fighting the cell's ability to be flexible and utilize the things you eat well to make energy and to stay in a metabolic advantaged state. And so we just use these signaling agents to just help prompt the patient in the right way. And so that's just one way is with the GLP-1. And then you can introduce other things to efficiency of the cell through other pathways of, you can start to get them involved in, hey, you like what this is doing. Well, guess how important maybe this microbiome might be in this whole picture. And they're like, what's a microbiome? And you're like, well, if I took a brick out of your gut, it'd be 1 billion bugs. And they're like, what? And you're like, hey, guess what? Those bugs compete against everything you eat. And those bugs, if you don't have them, you're not alive. And those bugs produce good and bad metabolites. And what if I told you we could start working on manipulating those metabolites and how they work better for you, like these GLP-1s? And then the lights start going off for people. It's like, really? You really can own this space when you let the patient know they're controlling the cell is making its own decisions. It's no more of that bullshit of giving a drug or something. Excuse me for that word.
We don't mind.
You're letting the cell gain control again.
Yeah. And it's an empowering message ultimately.
Absolutely, and that's what people don't know that can be accomplished.
Yeah,
because ultimately, that's what you're doing with exercise and nutrition.
Well, what do you make of the concerns that have emerged with regard to like these GLP-1 agonists, for example, like semaglutide or Ozempic, that when you take them, the weight that you lose is indiscriminate. There's the potential for lean mass loss.
Well, so in my initial statement is always, what a bunch of bullshit. And, these are people that just aren't educated enough to say things, or they're trying to use they're trying to get in on something and say things that they just haven't done enough work in looking at. And that's my initial statement, which is wrong, and I shouldn't say that, right? But I'm very honest and open about my thoughts. And the good response should be, hey, that's great, because people should be thinking about this, because any diet you have, I don't care what kind of diet it is, you're always losing muscle mass, right? It doesn't matter. I don't care what it is. You're always going to, if people look into this, it's always something I've been fighting forever with anything I've ever done with people. When they're losing weight, it's very, very easy to potentially lose muscle mass. So you have to have the steps in place to say, okay, well, if I know that's happening, are there things I can do to avoid losing muscle, right? We call it sarcopenia. We don't want to lose muscle. Muscle is metabolic currency, right? It's huge. It makes our myokines, our exerkines, there's over 500 different myokines, exerkines that we don't even know yet that are of significant value that we're trying to study, right? We know about 90 of them right now. And the focus here is that you got to get in the amount of protein that's important in maintaining muscle. And you also have to emphasize that, guess what? Resistance exercise is very important during any weight loss process, because it turns on certain signaling, it turns off myostatin, it turns off certain signaling agents that cause muscle loss, because the body's trying to compensate for loss. And that autophagy thing I talked about, it's cleaning the cell, and it's trying to be efficient. But if you're not going to give it its tools like protein, amino acids to maintain, you're not helping the signaling. You're not doing things that you need to do. So that's with any weight loss program. But what's really unique about GLP-1s is they actually, so you're going to be more sick. What I'm going to say is, all these people talking about muscle loss and stuff with weight loss, absolutely true. It's just, it's okay. We already know that. We knew that 100 years ago. This is where I get upset, is people don't realize that GLP-1s actually work in a signaling profile to stop muscle loss. One of the very few signaling agents that has that ability to turn off atrophy genes, specific ones that I would dull your people with, but that are specific to stopping muscle loss. Now, you can have all that best signaling, but if you're not going to get the protein in, it's still going to happen.
Right. So you can counter the potential for muscle catabolism with keeping your protein intake high and resistance training? Because when in a and correct me if I'm wrong, but when in a calorie deficit, your body's like, okay, we can ditch the fat, which is our energy store for the future famine that may or may not arrive, or we can ditch this highly metabolically expensive tissue like our muscle. And unless you give your body the signal that we need to hold on to the muscle with regular hypertrophic stimulus, i.e., like resistance training, then that's what it'll ditch, right? Because your body essentially thinks it's going to ultimately starve to death with a prolonged calorie deficit.
Absolutely. And it's going to go after preferred protein and break the protein down into amino acids as a source of energy. So it wants that. All you have to do is you got to meet the needs of the right nutrients, the right substrates at the time of what you're trying to achieve, understanding what this like signaling process is going to do to advantage the patient. And then you have, I have people that use GLP-1s to gain muscle, to build muscle, but to build good muscle.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's because what I'm doing with the GLP-1, what it's beside. So I'm taking advantage of what it can do for maintaining muscle and actually building muscle. But I'm also taking it's like for if you're taking advantage of what this autophagy aspect and truly it gets down to this beta oxidation of fat, you're increasing the body's ability to utilize its own fat as its primary energy source, because that's what's happening with this metabolic change. It's going to use fat to make more efficient ATP and NAD. And it's why people go through initially, they have a real metabolic change. I always tell people, hey, at the beginning, you're going to feel fatigue, you're going to feel tired, because it's almost like you're running these marathons because the body's changing.
Yeah.
But the energy, once you get that switch on and it truly is in that beta oxidation and you're getting that right amount of protein, it's incredible. The energy levels are amazing for people. And it's understanding that I think really makes a difference, and then taking advantage. So if you know that's happening, then there's other things you can add into that to take advantage of adding more energy or doing more to work on muscle mass. So it comes down to timing. It comes down to understanding the patient. It comes down to understanding what are you doing.
Yeah.
And so GLP-1s, what other people don't realize is that GLP-1s have specific effects on osteoblasts and osteoclasts. They actually increase bone mass. Are you kidding me? I mean, increase Dr. Seed. You're telling me I can increase muscle mass, I can increase bone mass? The answer is yes. That's a powerful message when you're doing something to be more in a catabolic state of losing, but it's catabolic efficiency, and then taking advantage of what you can do on the other side of that with the anabolism of building muscle and the other aspects of what a GLP-1 can do to signal. It's a pleiotropic, meaning has many pathways it works. And so I've just brought up bone, I've brought up muscle, I haven't brought up brain yet, I haven't brought up, I mean, there's anti-inflammatory pathways. So interesting story here is GLP-1s, originally we were studying for neurodegenerative problems, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
That's where it started.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, GLP-1, we have GLP-1 receptors in our microglial cells, in our astrocytes. This is where actually the research has gone back here now for where this is going to go with more in the neurodegenerative world, which I think is going to be tremendous.
So what are the neurologic benefits then of GLP-1 agonists?
So that's a great question. Let's take it like this. So the problem with let's say Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, any kind of neurodegenerative disease, is always this buildup of fibrillar proteins that just don't get, they either become, they're amyloid plaques, or they're Lewy bodies, or they're alpha-synuclein. They're things that just glob up, right? Well, remember that word autophagy?
Yeah.
Autophagy is what cleans those up. It's what cleans up those fibrillar proteins. It's just imagine like a Pac-Man in there going around and just removing stuff. Well, in these neurodegenerative diseases, when the cell loses its efficiency, remember I talked about flexibility and how it uses fat or glucose, it changes its metabolism, so it becomes less efficient, and it loses that ability to control autophagy efficiently. And remember, the brain is on all the time, and it demands efficiency. So that's why it's one of the first things to go, because it loses those aspects of efficiency. Well, what if you could improve autophagy? What if you could improve the ability of the cell to be prepared and be more flexible and clean itself up? Well, then you've got some things happening, right? You're solving some problems that people have been working on for a very long time, and it's very interesting because this is having real relevance now, and I use it very aggressively in neurodegenerative patients, and I'm very successful with it.
Wow.
And it's got all the science behind it. So it's not like I've discovered anything. I'm just a guy who reads a lot and knows how to put some things together and how to utilize it for the benefit of what I've been focused on for 40 years. Amazing. And that's cell efficiency, that's cell,
So that's how it, and then at what point was it, because I know that it was initially approved, at least as far as the FDA goes, for type 2 diabetes, was it not? And then there was a turning point somewhat recently where people realized that in these diabetes trials there was like this tremendous weight loss, right? So can you illustrate that timeline for us? Like,
yeah, it actually started, so that's you're close. So it actually started, the research all did start in the brain with these GLP-1s. And what they were finding was that there was weight loss with these patients. And it's like, well, what is this weight loss? What's going on here? And remember, metabolism is kind of important in the brain. And it's very significant. And that's kind of why we were focused on GLP-1s in the brain. And that carried over into us realizing that oh my gosh, we're improving insulin sensitivity, we're improving glucose absorption in muscle. Something is happening here and we're seeing significant weight loss. Wait a second, we need to direct this research into diabetes, into where this has more relevance and has a greater impact. And so then all that research really did push that way, which was brilliant, because it's changing. It's not like giving somebody insulin. Like, insulin's a peptide. Okay, peptides have been around for a very long time, and insulin's a peptide. Insulin helps to improve glucose absorption, and helps sensitivity of muscle accept glucose, which is your biggest utilizer of sugar, right? It doesn't change the what we call the phenotype of the cell, meaning, you're genetically, you may be predisposed to type 2 diabetes, and this is what happens, and we would call this a phenotype change because the environment might have caused it or diet changed it, but the cell actually changes. Well, GLP-1s can actually change phenotype where insulin can't do that, meaning you can bring back cellular function to a level that, wow. Because if you're I guess the point I'm trying to make is insulin doesn't necessarily make a cell better or more efficient, but it helps to improve that glucose problem. With a GLP-1, you're changing metabolism of the cell. You're changing the cell's ability to use proteins, fatty acids, and carbohydrates.
Wow.
Yeah, it gets me going every day. I think about it.
That's
it's
so
crazy.
Yeah, I was completely unaware of the potential for GLP-1 agonists in the setting of neurodegeneration. That's very interesting.
It's huge, in my opinion. I think it's because that is the, you can look at.
Well, it's like you can will yourself to lose weight and to better improve your blood sugar. But for somebody with a neurodegenerative condition, I mean, there are not very many tools that are helpful in that toolkit for somebody diagnosed with Lewy body dementia or Alzheimer's disease, for example.
Yes. It's a very, well, unfortunately, those things started 10, 15, 20 years before they even knew they were happening. And, but yes, I mean, we have many ways, I think, at looking at how we can, the biggest struggle using a GLP-1 in an older patient or even younger patients that get early onset dementia or Parkinson's or whatever is that's where you brought up something brilliant to talk about. This is why you have to understand how to use these. You got to know, well, I got to make sure I'm getting the right amount of protein in this person because they're the last ones you want losing muscle or losing because in Parkinson's we know, for instance, like circadian clock rhythms are paramount in how you can change the life of a Parkinson's patient because you got a window that you have to utilize with exercise and improving AMPK and NAD production that's specific for Parkinson's patients, for instance. So you have to, what I'm trying to say is it's very important to understand the molecular biology and the biochemistry of using these type of tools to benefit the patient and not harm the patient and not make, like you brought up, I mean, muscle loss is something you don't want to happen. It happens with any weight loss program, but you can stop it.
Yeah, you don't want it to happen for any age group, right? But particularly, it becomes particularly, I think, dangerous for somebody over 65, right? Who's already highly at risk. But I mean, there have been really interesting studies that I've seen where they've shown that, even people in their 80s that are naive to resistance training, they start resistance training and they can put on a really significant amount of muscle. I mean, probably not the same amount of muscle that a 30-year-old might put on given the same training window. But yeah, it just goes to show you that resistance training is super important, but also that these kinds of treatments do carry risks associated with them that are not trivial.
Well, I think you hit something very, very, very important, which most people don't realize, is that age should not be a discriminator to working out. In fact, again, if you know how to work with metabolism, with the immune system, with the microbiome, you can make an older person just as effective as a younger person in gaining muscle mass and taking advantage of building their VO2 max and all the things that are important in helping them maintain a not necessarily extending. I'm not one of those people who say I'm going to extend your life, but I'm certainly going to make every day of your genetic clock the best days they can be. And does that extend things? Possibly, but you can absolutely do that in older patients, and that's when it gets to be fun, because it's never too late. It's never too late, and it's so amazing to we think we know a lot, right? We know about this much. And
I agree with that.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm on this cusp of, I live in both worlds of academic medicine and this open space of molecular pathways and biochemistry of being on this forefront of things where people don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. And it's really hard to pull those all together to get everybody on the same page to say, hey, look, are we doing the right things right now? Are we really doing the best for our patients? Is our focus so narrowed that we've missed the boat? And I think we have. I think we all need to reevaluate our egos. We need to reevaluate our knowledge base. We all need to come back to this world of we need to learn a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at. I'm constantly I make fun of myself because once I think I know something, I don't know shit.
Well, you're humble. You're able to maintain humility, which I think is so important. And
but it's hard. I do have an ego, and I do like to be in charge, but it's like it never works. I get beaten down all the time. It's like, seriously, when you think you've mastered something and you've got it, and you're like, you become a little cocky, you're fucked. I'm sorry, you're in trouble because you have to. That's when you make mistakes. That's when I've learned the hard way that you have to always understand there's other things that you don't know. If that makes sense.
That completely makes sense, and I completely relate. It's really important to try as best you can to hold on to that beginner mindset, that humility.
Yeah. It's I wish I knew the answer. I constantly have to. I'm humbled many times.
And your background is in orthopedic surgery, is it not?
Correct.
Yeah, that's amazing. What is it about orthopedic surgeons that I feel like you're all jacked? Like Sean Baker, who I know his background is in orthopedic surgery. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he's like a big carnivore advocate. But the dude is massive. Uh-huh. Is there something about that line of specialty that inspires a more, I don't know, diligent approach to looking after one's body? Or is it just another case of correlation, not equal causation?
No, I think we're all attracted. I mean, from the orthopedics was just kind of a side thing for me. I mean, my passion is cellular medicine, and I'm the geeky guy. I'm the guy that just, my head's in this space of learning crazy little pathways and so forth. But orthopedics was a way that I could apply in recovery and repair, in injury, and it's how my whole process started, and where I could be most effective early on, because, and I think that's what your answer is here in orthopedics. We're all drawn to it because of the sports side of it, the recovery repair aspect of, most orthopedists are people who might have been previous athletes or doing things that they were always training. So we're trying to keep that mindset in what we're doing, and so we're fixing things, right? Mm-hmm. We're working on muscle injuries. We're working on joint problems.
You're cutting open injured and or diseased people.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's all about, they're hampered by some functional problem, and so maybe that's how we get attracted to it, and we're fixing things, and they're done. Once they're fixed, here's the other tough part is in orthopedics, I fixed you. Don't come back to me and tell me I didn't fix you well, which is another humbling experience, because you're given all these great traits to be a good surgeon, and you think you've done an operation that's been perfect. And I'll tell you, there are people that the operation didn't go perfect. And you're like, no, that's not supposed to happen. You're perfect. So don't tell me you're not perfect. So you got to learn, you're humbled again, learning that, okay, let's back up. And actually for me, those were some big, huge light bulbs that went off for me, thinking, okay, wait, all these other ways to help people. Is surgery right for this person? Or am I missing this? Well, wait a second. How metabolism can change, how carbohydrates can change a joint inflammation. Why don't you just start working on that with some people, and just let's see where that goes? And that was 30 years ago. Oh my God, I was keeping people out of arthroscopies and things that I used to think, I could fix you. I know I can make you better, but I was making people better by just changing their damn diet. I mean, that's how I kind of took my steps in learning the hard way of doing things that I thought were, I always thought, if I'm this patient, what do I want, right? Do I want somebody doing something to me, or can I do it myself? And I'd rather do it myself if I can do it. But then there are people who are, hey, just fix me. Don't tell me how to eat, or don't tell me you're an orthopedist. I'll get that advice from somebody else, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, prevention is always, I think, you get so much more bang for your buck with regard to, preventing these conditions in the first place, at least as far as my vantage point,
of course,
is concerned.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, think if you could, if I somehow could influence that in my life and show people that there are so many ways to change this healthcare system, in working on just understanding how important, again, exercise and diet are, we change the world, right? Mm. I mean, you would absolutely change just eating. I mean, just simple things like after you eat, get up and walk, and guess what? We'd cure diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, if everybody got up and walked right after they ate, what does that do? It levels out insulin. It absorbs glucose right away. It keeps that post-glycemic hyperglycemia under control, which is the most deadliest part of the day is after you eat. Mm. I mean, it's simple things like that. It's like looking at your plate and saying, hey, okay, I might not want to change my diet and be this super keto, Mediterranean, whatever, but I've got a protein here, I've got a carbohydrate here, I've got a fatty acid here. Hey, I know there's these studies that say if I eat my protein first and then I eat my fiber next, and I save the carbohydrate at the end, that makes a huge difference in the post-glycemic hyperglycemia. I mean, it's been proven. You can stop things. You can change people's lives just by picking their food groups. It's like, but, did anybody want to hear that when I was an orthopedist and they wanted to get fixed? Hell no. They're like, what the hell do you know?
Well, doctors traditionally get so little training with regard to nutrition, right? And then you take a specialty like surgery, and I would assume that nutrition is even considered even less relevant, right?
Oh my gosh, you hit something really hard there. That is so true. Preparing, that used to be something I was very passionate about, like that. So I could change a surgery if I could get somebody to fast for 48 hours. I could change their outcome significantly.
48 hours prior to the surgery?
Prior to the surgery.
Interesting.
Prior to the surgery.
Why is that the case?
Well, because you're setting this incredible process of autophagy and this process of once they start eating again after 48 hours, you're influencing a specific peptide hormone, IGF-1, that they're going to have this huge surge of IGF-1. And IGF-1 is huge for tissue healing, for metabolism, for the brain. It's like you've set this person up to win. And it's no secret. I mean, this is what...
You're like sensitizing their tissues to IGF-1. You're priming them, essentially.
You're priming them for actually a lot, but yes. And this is no secret. I mean, the oncologist, the surgical oncologist had known this for a long time with helping in how fasting could be very significant post-surgical problems. But it's just so hard to tell someone, hey, I don't want you to eat for about 48 hours, and they're going to look at you like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you there are ways to do things to set people up to win that they have no idea how. And I haven't given them one peptide. I haven't done anything. I've manipulated their diet. I've manipulated time for them, and that can be incredibly significant, because you're also doing things what people don't realize is when there's a reason you're going to surgery, right? Because there's something that's gone wrong. And if we look at the micro level, if we're looking at the level of cell function and environment and so forth, there are some changes that have occurred where there's some increases in what we call senescent cells. Senescent cells produce pro-inflammatory cytokines, chemokines, proteases, things that are not good for the environment. Well, that type of fasting and that setting up that environment actually helps to dampen and even remove, because it upregulates the immune system to come in and take away these senescent cells.
Interesting.
So you're setting this person up to be, because otherwise surgery activates senescence, and it's why you get into trouble after surgery. It's why infections can happen and wounds can heal slowly. And, most people have, unfortunately, most people you're operating on have comorbidities. They are diabetic, or they have other medical problems. So we went down a rabbit hole on that one, but
well, surgeries are also a risk for dementia, right? Like it cuts off oxygen, blood flow, or maybe not oxygen, but it impairs energy production in the brain to the degree that many people who come out of anesthesia, right? There's a heightened risk for dementia. This actually, I know somebody who, my co-director in a documentary project that I'm working on called Little Empty Boxes, about dementia, actually. My co-director in this project, his mother-in-law was cognitively healthy, had a surgery, went into surgery, came out of that surgery, diagnosed with dementia. Never recovered.
Yes.
Fully.
So there's a lot to that statement, and it is something that you have to be aware of, that there is any time you're going under so that's, I always tell people to consider a surgery like you're running a marathon. Did you prepare for that marathon? Can you go out and run 20 miles? Because that's what's going to happen inside your body, and the demands are going to be great. And so people like this person, potentially, you may not know it, but they were at a tipping point.
Yeah. And
that small metabolic alteration pushed them in a direction that again, so what happens there, that's a really complex process, but to make it, so glial cells, microglial cells, astrocytes, things that sit around neurons, they phase change. They become activated immune cells that then change and signal wrong. Well, that happens after surgery. That happens after insulting events. That happens in neurodegenerative disease.
Wow.
It's all about these phase changes of microglial cells and astrocytes. So you've got to be able to. So I used to have debates with anesthesiologists actually in my surgeries, which I have great respect with them, but they have great respect with me because I question what's happening with my patient because I'm in charge. It's my patient. And I would get upset about using certain things, scopolamine patches, things that could potentially lead to problems, because I was always thinking about this for my patients, about optimizing the best I could for their brain, because I saw that. I saw it a lot.
Yeah.
And it's but I can stop it. I can stop that stuff from happening. And I can do things, you can actually do things after surgery to make sure that doesn't become a problem.
Interesting. Like what? Like supplementation, like feeding, a certain dietary pattern?
So absolutely. So dietary pattern is huge post-surgery. The last thing you want to be doing is walking into the room and seeing that patient sitting there with all that glucose on their plate.
That's typical hospital food.
Totally right.
And it's like high glycemic.
It's crazy.
Highly refined carbohydrates.
It should be based more on fatty acids and fats that are good for the brain. And I would do things in telling families, hey, look, there's this amazing thing called a ketone ester that is the ultimate fuel source for the brain. And it's going to bypass some things. It's going to bring your brain back faster. Metabolism can be manipulated. And you have to take advantage of that, especially post-surgical, because you're screwed with things already working against you of what's been traditionally thought to be good. And you have to do things to turn that brain back on. besides that, you've got to do things. Movement and exercise is paramount after surgery, which we've gotten much better at doing, by the way. That's a key. That's a key player. There are other things that come into play with understanding circadian clock chronobiology. You've got to make sure your patients have the access of staying consistent with the circadian clock and having sunlight and all those things that are really important. And now you see hospitals now that have windows and everything that's important in helping those type of patients like that. I mean, we could go on and on, but that's...
Yeah, I mean, hospitals, they do a pretty... I mean, I've spent my a fair share of time in hospitals, and they typically... I mean, they're doing a lot, hospitals. They have to do a lot, but typically there's very little natural light. The food is just awful. It is a big problem. But yeah, anesthesia is something that I'm... Obviously, occasionally you need surgery. I've had surgery in my life, and you need that occasionally. And it's an amazing thing to be able to have that potentially life-saving procedure. But a lot of people will go under the knife, I think, voluntarily, willy-nilly, and I think it's important to advocate on behalf of the really significant risks associated with surgery as well.
Yeah, it's like any other. I'd always you had to be prepared.
Yeah,
you had to do your best to have everybody set to win. It was it's an environment that you can truly, if you got to control all the things you can control.
Yeah,
and it's everybody has to be on the same page, and everybody has to have respect for that patient that has given up their rights to everyone else to take care of them.
Yeah, like I have a cat, and they want to put her under anesthesia once a year for teeth cleaning, like teeth cleaning under anesthesia, because cats are like notoriously difficult to clean their teeth, right? And I'm like, all right, I understand the value in brushing her teeth, but to put her, I'm worried about her little brain,
That's to make it easier for the people brushing their teeth.
Yeah, it's a huge concern, but it's like a common recommendation, I think, in veterinary medicine, right? Like the annual teeth cleaning under anesthesia, and I'm like, to put her under anesthesia once a year, like that raises some red flags for me.
Well, see that, so we could go on about this, but this is what the beauty of orthopedics is that we got very good in not putting people under. We do things that are all blocks. So
nerve blocks.
Yeah,
right?
Well, yeah, we can block the hip, we can block the shoulder. Like I rarely would have a patient go under because I didn't want that. And I would talk to the patient. They'd be, I want to go under. I'd be like, no, let's talk about this. And especially your older patients. You were always looking, and I think that's where, another beautiful thing with orthopedics is that we didn't see as much of that problem per se because we had that type of control, and you didn't have to worry about that as much. But I think it's I do think it's a concern, and I do think it's something that you can be very well prepared for and not have those problems, afterwards.
Yeah. What about, let's go back to peptides, anti-aging peptides. A lot of people are talking about, though I know very little about the world of peptides, but BPC 157 comes up all the time. What is that, and what potential benefits does that have?
So let me see how I start. The anti-aging, I hate that word, but I consider all these things are about not anti-aging, but it's bringing back cell efficiency. It's bringing back cell flexibility, because it always comes back to metabolism being effectively utilized by a cell. When something goes wrong in disease, in cancer, immunity problems, neurodegenerative problems, it's metabolic changes occur. It's that simple, but yet very complex. But going back now, that's one answer.
Yeah, I get it. I agree with you.
The other answer, so BPC 157 is a peptide that was actually patented by a group in Croatia a group, very brilliant group of doctors, and Dr. Siderick, who is a person that I spent a lot of time communicating with a long time ago, who actually was the first one to synthesize BPC 157, which is it resembles a peptide that is produced in the gut.
Interesting. Gastric juice, right?
Yeah. It's similar. We all say it's the same, but it's very similar. And it was something to, it was a response type of peptide to stress, to adapt to. Actually, when the body goes through stress, there's things that happen, and you can get catabolism breakdown. Well, then you have to have rebuilding. Well, BPC is more of something to encourage rebuilding.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
like
so
when we're stressed out, people that are chronically stressed, they might develop ulcers in the stomach, right? Mm-hmm. And so is BPC or whatever its analog is that's naturally produced in the gut, is that meant to potentially help repair?
Correct.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, it's there to improve multiple aspects of cell signaling. There's no direct effect. There's many indirect effects. It signals many, like improved nitric oxide production, improved growth factors to accelerate healing of tissue. Even in a micro world of the cell, it's about microfilaments and this thing called F-actin and how a filament rebuilds itself inside a cell, because a cell has a skeleton inside it. BPC helps to accelerate it. It controls F-actin, and it's a brilliant thing in how it improves a cell, because a cell, essentially a cell's job is to stay at a certain size. If a cell loses its size, it loses its efficiency, it loses its hyperpolarization, it loses signaling. It's why like hydration is a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's like if you hydrate a cell, guess what it is? It's efficient. It's staying at its size, like a balloon at the right size. Well, BPC is very, very important in building that cytoskeleton of keeping that cell to keep that ability to do that. And if we think about it, if a cell starts losing the ability to control that rebuilding, it's not becoming efficient anymore. It's losing its efficiencies, it's losing its flexibility, and then all these other things happen inside a cell. So it's why it's so funny. It's why I used to talk to Dr. Citrick. I can't even say his word. I apologize, can't say it well. I used to talk to him a lot about things we were doing here in the U.S., and he'd say, Dr. Seitz, why you do all these things? All you need is BPC 157.
Interesting.
Because he's I'm going to tell you, he's pretty damn right about that, because it just does so many things that people don't understand. Even it has modulating effects in the brain, serotonin, dopamine. I mean, we don't know all of the vastness of this, and it's a modulator too. It has abilities to control. I won't.
That's so crazy, and I know that you can take it like orally. You can inject it at like sites of injury.
You can take a bath in it.
You can take a bath in it.
No, I'm just kidding.
BPC 157 bath bombs coming soon to your local Whole Foods.
No, yeah, it's one of the few peptides that you can do orally, you can do it intranasal, and you can inject it.
And are there like placebo-controlled trials?
Great question.
With these kinds of with BPC 157, for example.
Great question. There is one. The answer is BP. So that is the one peptide has the most animal studies done, the most studies I've ever seen on a peptide, with only like one significant clinical series that was done. But that's like hard to find that data that has been stated to have been done in Mexico, and talk specifically about a real clinical study done to show, randomized, double-blinded, a real study. Hasn't been done.
So more research is needed, but that's not to discount the clinical observations that you've made when prescribing it.
It's one of those things where it's so that's actually some of the things my society and we're doing as a physicians group is we're actually doing all those studies now. We're the ones that are going to change the scope of where this goes and doing the clinical studies to show the relevance of all of these peptides. And that's a big job to do it right and do it well and represent it right. But coming back to the and that's going to be done with clinical evidence, right? So this is going to be even much better than how most drugs come to a market and they get accepted. It's because they go through this double-blinded study with so many patients. Well, if you have a study with thousands of patients with clinical evidence of, it's evidence-backed, you can't, there's nothing that can refute that.
Right.
That's it. Well, in talking about BPC 157, that's the problem. It's so effective and it works if it's a real product, right? If it's a true pharmaceutical BPC, it's why it's caught fire and done all the things it's done around the world because it works. And
what does it work for? Like, well, you've mentioned, lots of potential applications, but like, for example, back pain.
Well, so it depends what the type of pain is. I mean, I consider it a recovery repair peptide. It can be used to help in rebuilding the microbiome, in working on the gut for certain reasons. When you're working on the microbiome, it can be used post workout for recovery repair of muscle. It has, with working with nitric oxide and some other pathways, it can influence pain, and it does. It absolutely has an influence on pain. Some of the fascinating things with BPC 157 is that if you use it in conjunction with a growth hormone secretagogue, BPC 157 increases growth hormone receptors on cells, so it increases the utilization of growth hormone.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's knowing all these little intricacies of these signaling agents where you can develop a program for someone to maximize whatever they're trying to, what they're trying to look in benefiting from.
Yeah, super cool. And I know that there's been some, like, regarding the legality, I think it was maybe specifically with regard to compounding pharmacies, but yeah, peptides they've been in the news somewhat recently, right? I think their legality or whatever, or the way that they're able to be prescribed has been under question.
And great question to bring up because in my opinion, this needed to happen. I think the FDA has made some very smart moves in looking. This is why the research and the evidence needs to be presented to show the proper use of these peptides. And what they have done is they've not stopped doctors from prescribing them. They've not stopped patients from using them. They've gone to sources of trying to cut a source off of where they feel that there hasn't been the
enough due diligence.
Yeah, which is a shame because I'm going to tell you that most of these compounding pharmacies do it better than the pharmacies do it, like traditional. They are under scrutiny like no one else, and they do things to a much higher level than a typical pharmacy would have to the standards they would have to meet. So it's in my opinion, I don't think it was the right way to do it, but I knew it was coming and I know it had to be done. And it's for me, I think it's been an excellent thing for my patients because it's going to force this process to happen the way it needs to happen. And that's to show the data and change some of these rules, which is my goal in working with the FDA and working with a select group of physicians here and around the world to put this all forth here in the next 3-4 years.
Yeah. As a physician specializing in prevention and longevity, are there any non-peptide, like supplements, for example, that you're particularly bullish on?
Oh my gosh. My book's not out soon enough, right? I have a book coming out here at the beginning of the year on about, she's shaking her head, on about 30 supplements.
Oh, cool.
That I think are just crucial and critical to So here's my my disclaimer. Let's go back. Exercise, diet, right? Those are the keys. Supplements are way overused. They're way overdone. And I actually find when I have people that come to me that are in dire states, whether it's immune complications or it's neurodegenerative problems or it's whatever, some of the first things I do is just remove their billion supplements they're taking. And it's incredible how many people get better with just that move.
Interesting. Removing all the supplements.
Yeah, because it's not that people aren't, their intentions are all there. But for instance, you can use, a lot of these supplements are antioxidants. Well, you can over-oxidize the body. You can do too much. It's why it's like when somebody's training to build muscle and they're taking vitamin E and vitamin C to stay healthy. It's like, well, you're never going to build muscle that way because you're fighting, you're over-oxidizing. Your muscles need that free radical signaling to adapt and build, and you're never gonna gain.
Yes,
and it's the same concept on a much bigger level.
Yeah. So just to unpack that for the audience, that's a really interesting point. Is that part of the adaptation process when doing high intensity exercise, resistance training, aerobic exercise, there's an inflammatory signal.
Has to happen, yeah.
Has to happen. And that's ultimately the signal that compels your body to adapt and grow stronger.
Correct.
Right?
You need
and so
it.
if you're just like pounding the body with antioxidants,
correct,
then you're blunting that stimulus.
Correct.
And so yeah, you're leaving money on the table.
100%. Well, what do we call it? You're peeing out a lot of money.
Well, that as well.
With
yes.
all your supplements you're taking.
Yeah.
It's expensive pee, right? That's what we call it, expensive pee.
That as well. And I am a fan of supplementation, but you have to supplement smartly.
At the right time.
Yeah.
And rotate. There's the rotation of supplements. I think it can all be done in a brilliant way to take advantage of what it all comes down to the redox of the cell, cellular redox. And redox is about oxidation and reduction. It's how electrons are transferred, basically. It really comes down to that. And if you can keep it in balance, you're winning. If you try to overdo it, it's going to catch you at some point and you're in trouble. And if you underdo it, you obviously aren't going to get there. So it's keeping it in balance, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. So give me your top 3 supplements for longevity.
Oh my God.
The heavy hitters.
Oh man, can I call a friend? No, I'm just kidding. Okay. I'm going to say these are going to be a little bit, so these are going to be a little obscure, and people are going to go, what the hell is Dr. Seeds talking about with this? But I'm going to say one of my top supplements would be a simple, well, it's not a supplement. Damn, it's a drug. Lactulose is a drug. Fuck. Okay. Okay. So I really like arginine alpha-ketoglutarate. Arginine alpha-ketoglutarate is something that is just so it's not understood. It's got so many benefits in the Krebs cycle and in how it can be this anapleretic addition to the Krebs cycle, which is just crucial to maintaining oxidative phosphorylation in a cell that really manipulates ATP and NAD. And it's a source of energy alpha-ketoglutarate is something over time that we don't get enough. We become depleted in, and it has so many benefits in fertility for females, in muscle building for females and males, for cellular flexibility. It's an incredible foundational amino acid to use in combination with like arginine. There's calcium and there's arginine. I like arginine because arginine is broken down into produce nitric oxide. Yeah. So
arginine alpha ketoglutarate.
Yeah, it's just a supplement. Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
That's one thing though. It's not arginine and then alpha. That's one supplement.
Yeah,
interesting. Okay,
that's one.
All right, number two.
Number two.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of a collagen peptide.
Okay, I love collagen.
Yeah, it's a misconception that people talk about collagen and that it can't do anything by taking it orally. That's just total bullshit. Collagen
I agree with that.
Collagen is just an incredible. We already know there's already been good science in showing just that regular collagen hydrolysate and a small amount of vitamin C makes a huge difference in recovery and repair of any injury, any tissue injury. That's where I first used it, based a long time ago, and I'm going to tell you, it's incredible. It's incredible post-surgical, but I learned, this is a great lesson. This is funny that we're actually talking about this. I kept a lot of people out of arthroscopies and surgery by starting them on collagen hydrolysate before there were collagen peptides. And it's because, collagen has an incredible effect on the immune system. And if I can go into the science a little bit, in a degenerative joint, when cartilage breaks off of the end of the bone cartilage and it's free in the joint, it becomes an antigen. It becomes something that the body sees as a foreign process, and it attacks it, and it's what creates an inflammatory state in the knee.
Wow. So
osteoarthritis is truly an immunologic process. Well, that has to do with something called tolerance. How does the body control what it attacks and what it doesn't? Well, there's these cells that are called master T cells or Treg cells that are very important in controlling tolerance and controlling the immune system. Collagen activates Treg cells. It actually upregulates Treg cells, and it can change the environment of a degenerative joint.
Wow.
Yeah, this is fat. It's just like, I knew all this shit and I never used it, and then I just thought, well, why don't we just start using it, because I bet this works. Oh my God. I was like, again, humbled. Like, I'd have people coming into surgery like, Doc, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. Do we really need to do this? And I'd be like, what?
Wow.
Did I start you on the collagen? Yeah. Remember, Doc, I've been doing it for 3 months. And I'm like, oh my God. And I started getting smarter.
That's amazing. I mean, Treg cells are important in the setting of autoimmunity.
Of course.
As well. So, I mean, collagen...
They're huge. So collagen's a huge player in the microbiome, in rebuilding microbiomes, because of the... you can't... So if you're going to work on the microbiome, you have to respect that the immune system is just as involved. And it's right there because it follows right underneath the cells. It's one layer under is your entire immune system, basically. And so you have to understand that you got to be working on everything. And collagen is just an incredible tool that not only do we know the benefits metabolically and just talking about the biochemistry, the patients will tell you, hey, Doc, my nails are growing faster. My skin looks different. My hair is growing better. Can't ignore that.
Yeah.
That's real stuff.
That's game, set, match.
Yeah.
Love it. I'm a big fan of collagen. Shameless plug to our collagen sponsor, Bubs Naturals. Y'all can get 20% off, code GENIUS. But I love it. I take it personally, and not necessarily every day. Speaking of which, is there like a recommended dose for prevention? Or is it, I don't know if we've established that, but I mean, what do you use clinically?
So usually I'm using the peptide versions now, where you only need like 5 milligrams? 10 grams? Well, that's 10 with, studies with the hydroxylates are up to like 15 grams.
Got it.
And I'll use a smaller dose, like 5 of the peptides, because you don't need. They're more efficient. You don't need them, and they actually come like that. So what Maddie said, you use 10. I use it twice a day, so you may use up to 10.
Got it. Very interesting. All right, so we've got arginine for your 3 favorite supplements of the moment for longevity: arginine, alpha keto, glutarate, collagen. Do you have a third?
Oh, I got a huge one.
All right, lay it on us.
I had to look at my audience here to call my friend because I got all these in my head.
You've got a nurse practitioner in the room.
I'm like, which one do I pick out here? And are you going to be ready? I mean, everybody's got to be ready for this.
I'm buckled in. Let's go.
Trehalose.
Trehalose?
Trehalose.
What the hell is that?
I love this. Trehalose. Are you buckled in?
I'm buckled in.
Trehalose is a sugar.
Interesting.
You're going to say...
How do you spell it?
Trehalose.
Okay.
Trehalose.
And then, so what's the deal with that?
I like how that sounds.
You're welcome.
That's our CEO of Telegenics. They're helping me out there.
Dope.
So Trehalose. Doesn't that sound good?
It does sound. It sounds friendly. There's maybe the hello aspect to it.
It's a synthesized sugar that is a disaccharide that what it does is, okay, let's start with you can digest trehalose with trehalase, which is a enzyme that sits in your gut, but it happens very slowly. And your trehalose competes against glucose. So what trehalose does is you can work with type 2 diabetics, you can work with type 1 diabetics, or just healthy people. You can delay that spike in glucose post-glycemic. After you eat, you can level out glucose. You can decrease insulin, because truly the key to life is controlling insulin and glucose. As I've always said, it's metabolism. Trehalose competes against glucose, and it keeps it from being absorbed too quickly. So glucose will sit around before it gets absorbed. So what I do with my patients is I have them take trehalose with each meal. It's a sugar that it's like my insurance plan that no matter how they eat, what they eat, or how they do it, I'm going to control their glucose absorption and their insulin secretion. It's brilliant.
Is it sweet? Does it taste like a sugar? Interesting.
It does. I have my staff cooks with trehalose. So let's talk more about trehalose. So trehalose is an incredible autophagy agent. Remember we talked about autophagy?
Yeah.
Well, where is autophagy the most important? In the brain. Trehalose, the research in trehalose right now in neurodegenerative science is exploding. And in fact, we're seeing some very interesting results now in all aspects of neurodegenerative disease. With, again, only makes sense, right? Because we're working on metabolism. And guess where else trehalose is making an impact?
Where?
Performance.
Interesting.
Performance.
Well, I'm reading about it that it's too.
Why would you read when you got me here to tell you?
Yeah, well, because
I'm just kidding. I
just pulled it up. I've got it to Wikipedia open. It's like it's 2 glucose molecules, but somehow it causes less of a spike in blood sugar than glucose.
Yeah, it's a disaccharide, 2 glucoses that once it's broken apart, then it's absorbed. Glucose is absorbed.
Wow.
So you have to have that enzyme to break it apart, and it takes longer to happen. So that trehalose competes against glucose in the gut. But then there are trehalose that's absorbed that actually goes to the brain. We have trehalose utilized in the brain. This is where it's fascinating.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's awesome stuff. Like, I'm really engaged in that part. In fact, we're doing some work with IV trehalose, which is, I think, where the crazy, amazing stuff is with what this can do in the brain.
So what's it doing in the brain?
Improving autophagy, improving metabolic flexibility of the neuron, which is crucial, right? And that autophagy thing is huge in the microglial cells and the astrocytes.
For sure.
It's about cleaning up, right? So just think about this. What if you could just change this whole industry and say, guys, why aren't you all using Trehalose in your food? Why aren't you using Trehalose in your candy and your whatever? Do you know how many people, do you know how we would change the world? And the Japanese actually just first synthesized this Trehalose, and it was incredible. And since then, we've got so many venues of research on this. I introduced this about how many years ago? 3 years ago at a conference.
Cool.
And
can it be used as a sugar substitute?
Yes. So I put it like it's a routine. I'll put it in my coffee. You know, like you want me to destroy the, what is that? No, what's the
monk fruit stevia? What?
No, what's the coffee drink that some guy became famous on?
Oh, like butter coffee?
I don't know, some bullshit, something, whatever. What?
I don't drink it.
Yeah,
anymore,
whatever
but
the hell.
It tastes really good.
But I'm just saying, look, you take your coffee, put a little Trehalose in it, that kills anything that anybody ever came up with.
Wow.
Put a little collagen in it, and then add a little bit of fructoooligosaccharide or something.
This is very cool. It's
wait till you read my book. It's gonna be.
I can't wait.
It's gonna be a game breaker, and my team's been killing me for years because it's taken me years.
I love
to
it.
write
Well, no, I mean, because I've never heard of it, and so this is super cool. That it's an autophagy inducer, allegedly independently.
He's reading it. He's like,
Yeah.
Does this guy know what he's talking about?
No, we love it. We love it. We love it. We love it. We don't have like have you ever watched like the Joe Rogan podcast? You know, he's got like a Jamie, pulls up stuff. So we don't have a Jamie. We don't have our own Jamie. I am the Jamie.
You're a good.
I'm the Rogan and the Jamie.
You're a good
of
Jamie.
the Genius Life. Yeah,
you're a good Jamie.
So I pulled it up, and the autophagy is allegedly independent of mTOR, which is great because mTOR is like muscle building.
Yes.
So you don't want to inhibit mTOR.
Correct.
Necessarily.
Correct.
During the day, right? I mean, you inhibit it when you sleep.
Well, yeah, and so people always.
But mTOR is good. People have this like idea of mTOR being like bad.
Well, it can be. Cancer is all mTOR. Neurodegenerative disease is mTOR. It's when a cell is just going hard and it's using too much glucose.
It's out of control.
Yeah.
I love it. Learn so much, Dr. Seeds. You're the man.
Hey, can you tell my team that?
I'm just glad because the Mind Pump guys connected us. They were like, you got to connect with Dr. Seeds. And any friend of Mind Pumps is a friend of mine. So,
thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
I've got one last question for you before we wrap up. But before that, where can people find you on social media? And we didn't even get into your tie. We didn't even have it, but I want to hear about that. I guess we can. It's a lost art, and your watch is super cool. You've got this very interesting. People should definitely check out this conversation on YouTube because you're a stylish man.
That's kind of you to say that. Where do you want me to start with a bow tie, or do you want to even talk about that?
We'll get to that on round two. We'll get to that on round two.
Yeah, we could do it some other time.
Where can people find you on social media? And you mentioned that you've got this book that's coming out next year. So where can people find out more about that, or perhaps even pre-order it?
That's always where I don't know how to reach me.
You on social media?
I know I am.
You have an Instagram. I've seen it.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what it is.
Dr. William Seeds.
Okay.
Dr. William Seeds. Okay, there you go.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Great.
Very creative.
Very creative. Last question that gets asked everybody on the show.
Okay.
What does living a genius life mean to you?
That's a great question. That's something like I would be talking to my kids about. A genius life for me is probably some of the things we talked about here. A genius life would be just respecting the fact that you don't know enough and that there's always more to an answer than you know, and also respecting your own intuition. For me, it's always kind of going against what everybody else thinks. I just don't follow that kind of norm. I'm always like, if I have a hunch or if I have a thought, I don't let people influence me, and because I don't care what they think of me. I need to figure it out. And so a genius life for me is just never giving up, not giving up on my patients, not giving up on finding an answer, and then not accepting that answer because there's more. I know that's crazy, but that's true. And I think also, also just understand, having respect for other people's opinions, which is always difficult. Because there are a lot of people that have
shitty opinions. I said it. Don't worry.
Thank you.
I said it, not you. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.